everybody, welcome to another and very special Top 5 board gaming video. Today's video is special because it's all about games that we don't have, but they're the games we all really want. We're going to be talking about Grail Games. That is to say, games you really want to have, but for whatever reason, do not own. Now, before I get started, as always, please, if you haven't done so already, take a look at my Facebook and my Twitter pages. That's where I post new contests and giveaways, new videos, fun articles, all sorts of different stuff, and it's a great way for you guys to keep in touch with me. You all know that I love hearing from you. So getting back to today's video, talking about Grail Games. And in this case, what are we talking about? Well, these are games that you can't get for one reason or another. They're really expensive, or they're out of print, being really the two most common reasons. But at the same time, it's something that you really want to have. Maybe it's a game that you fell in love with when you first started gaming, or as a kid, and so like it reminds you of home. Maybe it's a theme that you absolutely love, some kind of an IP that you really want to have, something along those lines. There's any number of reasons for it, and the fact is that for me personally, I recently got one of my Grail games because it came back it came back as a reprint after a really long time. Star Wars Rebellion. That's right, I got this big giant game here. Now, the fact is, I'm gonna have to eat a bunch of ramen for like a month in order to afford this game. But the fact is, I have wanted this ever since it came out. I've played it a couple of times with somebody else's copy, and I was just like, yes, boom, I need to have that. It is one of my games. I love Star Wars, I love these tactical skirmish games, and so I was like, I need to have this. And that's why it was one of my Grail games, and thankfully with the reprint I was able to get it, even if it means that I have to eat like crap for a few weeks in order to afford it. I don't care. Obviously, that's an example of a game that is technically in print, and so it's available, but I just didn't buy it because it was so expensive for so long. So, as always, I'm very curious what you guys have to say about this. What are your Grail games and why? What is it about the game that makes you say, oh, I need that game, I need to have it for whatever reason? For my list, I'm going to have a bit of a mix of all sorts of different things. So, as always, I hope that you enjoy it, and we're going to get started with my number 5. At number 5, I've actually got the only game on this entire list that is still in print, which is why it's so low. Because technically, like with Star Wars Rebellion, I could go and just like buy the game, but I just haven't done it already because it's really expensive, unfortunately. The game itself is Descent, Journeys in the Dark, and preferably the second edition. The first edition is out of print, unfortunately. But that said, Descent itself is a dungeon crawler game, and it's really interesting because it's essentially like Dungeons and Dragons, like the old pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons, not like the board game versions, where you've got a GM or a DM, whatever you want to call them. They are controlling all the bad guys, and then you've got a group of people going through the dungeon, getting experience and new items, new abilities, all of this kind of stuff. And it's an incredibly deep experience, and I was genuinely surprised when I was able to play it. I haven't played through an entire campaign, but I've played through a few times, and it's mind-boggling how much detail they got into this. We are talking about, like the gorgeous little miniatures, amazing artwork, and it just feels like a D&D campaign. You're able to save your progress. Again, the fact that you've just got a GM or a DM, whatever you want to call them, somebody in charge of the bad guys, is absolutely amazing. And amongst sort of board games in general, it's fairly unique in that sense. You've got things like Fury of Dracula that have somebody controlling the one bad guy, but that sort of dynamic is relatively rare. And for me personally, I got my start in role-playing games with Dungeons and Dragons. I was playing RPGs before I was playing board games. So when I played Descent, I was just like, oh my god, I have to have this. But at the same time, it's just so expensive, I haven't been able to bring myself in order to buy it. And so that's why Descent is my number 5. At number 4, I've got a game that I have actually never talked about on my channel whatsoever, and that is Die Machter, or Die Machter, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This is actually a sort of parliamentary diplomacy type of game, where the idea is you are trying to win seats in the German parliament. And I know, it sounds really weird and kind of boring and stuff, but the fact is, I really enjoy diplomatic negotiations and, you know, like passing the laws and all that kind of stuff. One of my favorite games of the category is Article 27, which is about the UN. And in this case, it's relatively similar, where you've got like your own platforms, and so you're trying to pass laws that favor your platforms, you're trying to gain seats in parliament and all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, Die Machter has the interesting status of being #1 on Board Game Geek. No, I don't mean #1 on the actual list, the actual rankings, but if you type in Board Game Geek and game/1, it is the first entry in Board Game Geek. I know, it's random, right? But the fact is, it's a really fun game, and for my purposes at least, it is one of the first hobby games that I ever played, and by far the first one that was really about diplomacy, diplomatic negotiation, and this sort of like give and take dynamic between all the different players. I absolutely loved it, and so that's why Die Machter is my #4. At #3, I've got a game that is based off of a science fiction IP that I really, really love. I've loved the movie, the books, and all this kind of stuff, and has actually been sort of kind of remade in modern times as well. The game itself is Dune. I believe it came out in the early 70s, if I'm not mistaken, and everybody raves about it whenever they mention it. They're like, oh my god, the Dune game is so good, it's this, that, and the other. And in modern times, we have a game, it is Twilight Imperium Rex, that people say is relatively similar to Dune in terms of how it works and how it plays and how it feels, and I've really enjoyed Rex, but the fact is, I love Dune. I love the IP itself. I've read and seen and all that kind of stuff. I know Dune, and it's absolutely incredible. I would love to have the game. At the very least, I want to play it. I've never even played it, but I really want to have it in my collection, simply so that I can say, look how awesome this is. I've got the Dune board game, and it is amazing, because you guys know I'm a huge fan of sci-fi, and it's just, it would be perfect for me. But that said, for all of that, Dune is my #3. At #2, I've got a game that may be a little bit unexpected for you guys if you have seen my videos before, because this is a really classic, very intense war game, and it is Paths of Glory. I have been told about Paths of Glory essentially since I started doing YouTube videos. And the fact is, I still have not been able to play it. I cannot find anybody who owns it. I'm sure that somebody I know has it somewhere, maybe buried in a pile of games somewhere. But the thing is that as of right now, I believe it's out of print, if I'm not mistaken. I always see it for like over $100. So I just can't bring myself to pay that much to get it. But the thing is, I really, really want to try it. And because people hold it up as this amazing war game and how great it is and all this kind of stuff, and I hear you, and I've read about it, and I've seen the reviews, and I know how to play it, and I know what it's all about, and I've seen people play it, I've watched it, and I just really, really want to do it. The reason that it's so high on this list is simply because of the fact that so many people have mentioned it to me, and I just really want to give it a try, and I want to have sort of the variety to my game collection, because you guys know I really don't have a whole lot of real, true, blue, honest to goodness war games, unfortunately. So Paths of Glory would be Paths of Glory would be a wonderful addition to my little collection. But that said, for all those reasons, Paths of Glory is my #2. At number 1, I finally have a game that I can actually represent with something else. Now, this is a game that I have loved literally since I started playing hobby games, and more than anything, I want to have everything about it in my collection. The game is Cosmic Encounter. Yes, it's back for another list. This particular version is the Avalon Hill version, and it's also the first version of Cosmic Encounter that I bought. Now, you may notice that it's really beat up. This thing is basically a piece of crap. But I bought it in shrink. It was super cheap because it was so beat up, and it still has all the pieces and all that kind of stuff, so I love it. But you guys know Cosmic Encounter is my favorite game of all time. So what I've been looking for years are all of these out-of-print versions, because the game actually came out decades ago and there have been so many different iterations of it. So I've been trying to track them down, but the problem is they are so expensive. You can find them on eBay, and sometimes they'll have them on Amazon and a few other places, but people are asking for like hundreds of dollars to get a reasonable collection from the different iterations of it. And again, you might say, well, Danny, like, you've got the Fantasy Flight version, you've got the Avalon Hill version, why would you want anything else? And essentially this boils down to me having like sort of my collector's mindset, that it is my favorite game and I want to have all of the game that I can get. Because the fact is, when I started playing hobby games, I was playing the Mayfair version of Cosmic Encounter, which is, I mean, it was called Cosmic Encounter, but then they had, like, I think it was Simply Cosmic and More Cosmic were some of the expansions for it. I don't remember the very first iteration of it, but I have played that as well. The friend who hosted all the game nights when I was younger had all the Cosmic Encounters, and I was just like, whoa, this is amazing. And I want that experience again. Well, not necessarily that experience, but I just want to have those games because, again, it is my favorite of all time, and I would love to have it on my shelf. I likely would never play it. That's the fact. I would probably just play the Fantasy Flight version because it's the new one and it is very streamlined and it's very good and I really love it, but I would just love to have those old ones on my shelf just so I can be like, ah, yes, I've got them. But for all of that, Cosmic Encounter is my #1 Grail game. Well, folks, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 favorite Grail games. And again, this is kind of an interesting category because I'm very curious what you guys have to say about it, because I want to know what makes a game a Grail game for you. Again, for me, I have a big mix of different stuff and different reasons for it, like whether it's theme or because it's a game I enjoy and I want different versions of it, or because it just reminds me of something else that I've done, or I mean, because you guys say it's amazing and so I want it. You know, like whatever it happens to be, I'm so curious what you guys have to say. But again, this is just a fun category. It's just a cool thing, and it's something that we as gamers, as players, as collectors, whatever you want to call yourself, can aspire to and say like, yes, this is the stuff that I want to have, and it's going to complete what it is that I've got here, or I'll feel more complete type of thing. It's kind of an interesting thing. It's a very unique mindset to have, and I'm curious if any of you have succeeded at it. How do you feel when you get your Grail games? Do you feel fulfilled and all that kind of stuff? Like, I know for me, when I got Rebellion, I was ecstatic. I really genuinely was. But that said, thank you so very much for watching. As always, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.